Last night, hundreds of fans packed into the small venue to see their favorite band perform. Among them was Emily, who was struggling to fit in with her new friends at school. Emily was afraid that the bullies would gang up on her. She felt very down because she sensed that the bullies looked down on her. The daily bullying wore her down. Her parents were also worried about her recent state and tried to cheer her up. To encourage Emily, her Aunt Mary always asked after her well-being. That night, as the gates of the venue opened, people flooded into the venue. After the performance, the fans spilled out of the exit. Emily went home, turned on the TV, and relaxed by watching her favorite show. The next day, Emily's parents called her grandparents, who always watched over her. The grandparents tried to butter her up to cheer her up, but it ended up tiring her out. She felt a bit annoyed by how her grandparents fussed over her. However, Emily remembered the professional musicians she looked up to and regained a bit of courage. She decided that she would chase her dreams someday and shine just like them. John grew up in the neighboring town from a young age and has many fond memories there. He was named after his grandfather, Charles, from childhood and always hoped to become like him. He was often told that he took after his grandfather, and those words made him proud. At school, John quickly got on with new friends, and they enjoyed many adventures together. However, he noticed that he started to grow out of his clothes as they became tight. He also enjoyed looking after his younger sister and felt responsible for ensuring her safety. One day, when John and his family saw new residents moving into town, they decided to pull together to welcome them. The new family had twins, and at first, John found it difficult to tell them apart, but soon he learned their differences. John's parents chose to settle down so the family could live together and renovated the old house to let in more people. John often helped his family by putting in furniture where it was needed. They also let out the beautiful view from the house's windows. As winter approached, John began to warm to his new friends, and they spent many enjoyable times together. Sometimes, they played outside until late at night, and his mother often stayed up waiting for him. One time, while playing with his friends, John accidentally ran away into the forest and got lost. He walked for hours until he came back home, but he learned a lot from that experience. John and Emily met in high school thanks to their friends who brought them together. They quickly became close and spent a lot of time together. John fell for Emily and finally gathered the courage to ask her out. They promised to stick together for a long time, supporting each other. John always made sure to care for Emily, and Emily felt she could confide in John. However, when they went to college, they gradually began to drift apart. Busy lives on different campuses made it difficult to stay in touch. Emily started to go out with someone else, and John also spent time with new friends. One day, Emily heard from John after a long time. He still had feelings for her and was considering getting back together. John decided to set up a special date to win Emily back. John took Emily out to a lovely restaurant, and they enjoyed their time together again. However, they realized that their relationship was fizzling out. Eventually, they decided to break up once more, supporting each other as they went their separate ways. Even so, John and Emily remained grateful for each other and promised to stick by one another during difficult times. They cherished their past memories while continuing to move forward into the future. On Saturday morning, I popped in at Brian's house. Angelo turned up at my house at 6 o'clock, and I was still in bed. On the way back from the sea, we called in at my grandmother's house. After chatting for hours, he suggested sticking around until dinner. After talking a bit at the front door, Malik invited me in. After the interview, the secretary showed Connor out. "While you're in town, be sure to swing by. I'd love to see you." My dad came into the house and took off his coat. Yesterday afternoon, Liam dropped in for coffee and a chat. "Dear Mason and Emily, we'd like to invite you over for a barbecue to celebrate Beth's birthday on Saturday. Come over anytime after 2 p.m., and be sure to bring along your kids. With love, Omar and Beth. P.S. If you like, you can stay over." Last night, our new neighbors Kaito and Reiko had me over for dinner. They showed me around their beautiful house. On her way back from the gym, Miriam stopped off at the supermarket for dinner. Omar said to come over anytime after 2 p.m. Mason and Emily brought along their kids to the barbecue. It seems Kia invited along everyone she knows to the party. While everyone was in the garden, I found Klaus snooping around the kitchen. In the end, we ended up staying over at Beth and Omar's house. Katie asked Lisa, "Do you want to come out?" Chris spends most weekends hanging out with his friends. Vincent and Maya decided to stay in, order pizza, and watch a movie. Once a year, my school friends and I go out to eat and catch up on our lives. On the way to the art exhibition, I asked Joe, "Do you want to come along?" The carnival was amazing. We stayed out until dawn. Many guests were milling around waiting for Raj to give his speech. Fleur and Claire were getting ready to go out for the evening. I was happy to see Marvin at the party. He always knows how to liven up the atmosphere. Amara decided to tag along with her sister when going to the ice rink. Our local hotel has a large room available for hire out for parties. Ella loves getting together with her friends at the ice cream parlor on Friday nights. Joe suddenly took off without saying where he was going. We headed off early to the beach to avoid the crowds. The movie was so bad that we slipped out halfway through. Neil was turned away from the nightclub because he was dressed too casually. Charlie stormed out of the store because the manager refused to give a refund. I said, "I hate to tear you away, but you'll miss the last train." Paul needed to shoot off at the end of the meeting to catch the train home. Nadia had to dash off to pick up her kids from school.
Angelica helped her son get ready for school by buttoning up his shirt. Tom realized he was running late, so he quickly threw on his jacket and tie and ran to catch the bus. The dress is a bit too big, so it needs to be taken in a little. The jacket is too tight, so it needs to be let out a bit. As Hassan was running across the schoolyard, one of his shoes came off. All the children at the party were dressed up as dinosaurs. Kelly stopped to tie up her shoelaces. It was so hot in the auditorium that Mario took off his sweater. Gemma's shoes go well with that dress. Alex put on her best dress to go out for her wedding anniversary. Make sure to wrap up before heading out in the cold weather. Ernie is showing off his new jacket to everyone. Mirek did up his coat to protect himself from the cold wind. As soon as Maurice came inside, he hung up his coat.
Zane folded up his clothes and put them away in the closet. Carly's shoes are too big for her, but she'll grow into them. Gio plans to give his sweater to his younger brother, since it has become too small for him. The sun is very strong, so be sure to cover up. Marlon zipped up his leather jacket and walked towards the door.
Sakuraji had to face up to the reality that due to his injury during the game, he wouldn't be able to play basketball for a while. This injury led to his temporary break from the sport. Meanwhile, Rukawa believed that the new tactics would bring about a victory for the team. However, Akagi always competed with Rukawa, striving to improve on his own skills. Haruko, too, aimed to measure up to her brother's expectations with her performance during the games. On the day of the final match, the team was confident that the new tactics would live up to the audience's expectations. As the game progressed, the opponents gradually died out, and in the end, Shihoku achieved a splendid victory. Sakuraji's alarm clock goes off at 7 a.m. every morning. Rukawa wakes up early to freshen up and head out for basketball practice. After finishing breakfast, Akagi sits down in the living room and reads the newspaper. Before going to school, Haruko set about cleaning her room. Sakuraji heads off to school at 8 a.m. After school, Sakuraji practices late, and he usually gets in past 7 p.m. One night, Sakuraji woke up because he heard a noise outside. Haruko, feeling tired, lay down on the sofa to take a short rest. Akagi, after a brief break, quickly got on with his basketball training. On Saturday morning, Rukawa usually gets up around 10 a.m. After that, he potters about in the garden. Haruko stayed up late studying for her exam the next morning. When Rukawa saw Sakuraji dozing off at his desk, he tried to wake him up. During the speech, quite a few people nodded off. On Sunday morning, Akagi slept in until 11 a.m. One morning, Sakuraji slept through his alarm again and almost ended up being late. Rukawa is sleeping off the effects of the anesthesia, so he should be up soon. Haruko was so tired that she decided to turn in, even though it was only 8:30 p.m. That night, Sakuraji slept over at his cousin's house. After a long day at the office, Akagi dropped off in front of the TV. Sakuraji and Rukawa were set to travel together for the game. On the way to pick up Sakuraji from his house, Rukawa's motorcycle suddenly broke down. They quickly got into a taxi and headed to the station. At the station, they got on a train bound for Paris. Along the way, the train stopped, and they decided to get off at the next station. They hailed a taxi to the venue, but suddenly, Sakuragi got out and started running towards the arena. Before the game began, Akagi picked them up and drove them to the venue. After the game, on the way back, Akagi pulled in at a nearby cafe, and they all had a quick meal together. Afterwards, Akagi carefully checked the route and then drove off. Suddenly, Sakuragi remembered something and asked Akagi to turn back. When Akagi pulled over, Sakuragi got out of the car and ran off. In the end, everyone safely returned home, bringing a fun day to a close. Sakuragi loves shopping, and today he decided to head to the shopping mall. He found a scarf he liked and went to check out. He used his credit card to pay for the scarf. Later, Rukawa also showed up at the mall, planning to go camping over the weekend, so he decided to stock up on insect repellent. However, the mug he bought online was broken, so he intended to send it back. Meanwhile, Akagi bought up all the pizzas in the store before the party. Mitsui spent hours looking around the store but couldn't find a shirt he liked. He thought it would be a good idea to shop around before buying a new car. Haruko decided to splash out on clothes for her summer vacation. Every time Miyagi found an item on his shopping list, he crossed it off. Kogir put a melon in his basket and checked off the item from his list. However, when he went to the market to buy bread, it had already sold out. Sendo couldn't wait to try out his new gaming console. Coach Anze decided to knock down the price of the jewelry by 15% to attract customers to the new store. Sakuragi bought a new laptop online and picked it up at the local store the next day. However, he didn't like the sweater he had bought, so he decided to take it back. By the time he arrived at the sale, other shoppers had already snapped up all the good deals. When fans learned that his favorite author was bringing out a new novel, they lined up outside the bookstore to buy it. Finally, Sakuragi decided to try on a new shirt in the fitting room. On the day of the match, dark clouds began to roll in, causing Rukawa and Sakuragi to hope that the game would let up. Before the match, the weather started clearing up a bit, the wind was picking up, and the supporters were filled with anticipation. As the game started, the sky clouded over again, and suddenly, rain began bucketing down. Mitsui and Miyagi searched for shelter to avoid getting soaked. Fortunately, once the storm had blown over, they were able to resume the match. During the game, Akagi felt the temperature rapidly cooling down, so he did up his jacket to keep warm. As they restarted the game, the weather gradually calmed down, and at the same time, the excitement of the spectators grew. By the end of the match, the team's efforts were rewarded, living up to the expectations of the crowd. Soon after, the weather warmed up again, and Shohoku High secured victory. The match on this day saw the rain ease off, the wind die down, and the team delivered an outstanding performance. It demonstrated how their unity and perseverance supported them, even in challenging conditions. In the morning, Sakuragi booted up the computer and logged in to access an important document. However, the system went down, leaving him unable to do anything. Meanwhile, Ayako was setting up a new printer. Rukawa scrolled up to the top of the document to find the company's address. After he found the information, Ayako zoomed out on the image to get a better view of the whole picture. Then, she printed out the important contract and called Mitsui and Akagi to sign it. Kogir rolled out new software within the company that included project details, which brought about new challenges for the team. To complete the project, he backed up the previous data and saved it on a secure external drive. Afterward, Sakuragi typed in his password to access an important website. He scrolled down to the bottom of the page and found the necessary information. Meanwhile, Coach Anze was planning to phase in new computers gradually while phasing out the old models. He hoped this change would greatly improve the school's technology environment. The basketball team members of Shohoku High School were facing a new school regulation. The rule prohibited students from running in the school, so Akagi called on the student council to review the rule. Meanwhile, Sakuragi watched out and walked carefully in the hallway to avoid trouble, but he eventually collided with Mitsui, leading to a beat-up fight between the two. Later, Coach Anze intervened and handed over the situation to both of them. He explained that the rule was brought in to ensure the safety of the students. However, Rukawa felt that this regulation was restricting the students' freedom and suggested that the student council vote on the matter. That night, Sakuragi headed to the clubroom to put away the club equipment, but he was pulled over by a security guard along the way. The guard asked about a recent theft incident and suspected that Sakuragi might be involved. Sakuragi immediately asserted his innocence and stamped out his actions. As the incident moved toward resolution, the basketball team members of Shohoku High School supported each other and worked together to overcome the difficulties. They learned a lot from this experience and became a more united team. Akagi was cutting back on expenses to pay off the rent for his dormitory. He especially decided to cut down on eating out and get by with home-cooked meals. On the other hand, Rukawa forked out for expensive basketball shoes, which contributed to improving his performance in games. Mitsui was struggling with unexpected expenses, so he asked his friends to chip in a bit of money. Miyagi deposited his part-time job earnings into the bank and started saving up little by little for the future. Sakuragi suddenly came into an inheritance from his aunt, and he used that money to pay up for his mother's hospital bills. He also spent some of it on a birthday present for Ayako. Kogure ran up a large debt to renovate an old house, but he was troubled by how to pay it off. While watching over these students, Coach Anze hoped that they would become financially independent and live responsibly in the future. The game day felt long, as if time was dragged on. As the game progressed, Sakuragi began to gain confidence in his play and grew to appreciate his rivalry with Rukawa. Mitsui broke up the team meeting and suggested a tactical change to Akagi. This change had the potential to turn around the game. However, the preparations for the game had eaten into their time, leaving Miyagi exhausted and nearly unable to move before the match. During the game, Akagi noticed Coach Anze trying to find a way to fit in Sakuragi, who had gotten into foul trouble. Ayako, while watching the game, sensed that Sakuragi's motivation was freed up more than ever. In the end, the team united to win the game, and after the match, they all reaffirmed the importance of hanging on. When Miyagi suggested, "Let's hurry up and go celebrate," the team smiled and agreed. With the arrival of spring, as the town's clocks go forward, Maria was looking forward to a vacation at the beach. When she arrived at the beach, memories of childhood family trips to the sea came flooding back. Those memories stirred up her heart. As Maria thought back to her younger days, those times took her back to the past. When she looked back on her college days, she remembered the happy times, which brought back pleasant moments from her past once again. On her way home, she found an old toy, which also brought back memories of her joyful childhood. The toy was found in a building that had been constructed in the 19th century, but had since been turned into a convenience store. However, Maria made plans to turn back the building into a home and intended to live there. Her plans quickly panned out, and as everything went smoothly, her schedule became busier, but she recognized it was coming up. She had to push back a meeting with her friend Claude, who had fallen ill, but she hoped for Claude's recovery. That autumn, when the clocks went back an hour, Maria was truly grateful for the new life ahead of her. Kenji had been working as an engineer for a long time, but one day he suddenly decided to chase his dream. He had always dreamed of riding a motorcycle, but he ended up studying French. After that, He stayed up late hammering out a new treaty for a project. One day, he asked his friend Sabrina if she wanted to go camping, but she threw out the idea immediately. Kenji's father had wanted to buy a motorcycle for years, but Kenji never expected him to actually go through with it. He and his girlfriend wanted to get married in the summer, but they haven't pinned down a location yet. His friend Giovanni forgot about the art project, but managed to throw something together. Kenji thought he should plan ahead before setting off on a long car journey. He also thought he should think ahead and save some money for the future. They had been meaning to get a new kitchen for years, but they never got around to it. When estimating travel time, you need to allow for traffic delays. To firm up the details of the new contract, the two directors held several meetings. Kenji also looked ahead and pictured what he wanted to be doing in 5 years. Ed had promised to do a bungee jump with Kenji, but he backed out at the last minute. Dexter was going to ask Becky out on a date, but he chickened out. Later, the store he bought from weaseled out of giving us a refund by claiming we had broken the vase. Audie always managed to wriggle out of helping with the cleaning. Seb said he would help paint the house, but he went back on his promise. Finally, Cleo didn't want to go out, so she pretended to be sick to get out of it. On the day of the match, time felt as if it was listening up. As the game progressed, Kenji began to gain confidence in his play and started to look out for his clash with Aya, developing a sense of attachment. Satoru looked over the team meeting and suggested a change in tactics to the leader. This change had the potential to look into the flow of the game. However, the preparation time for the game was filled with a stinky smell, causing Hiroshi to become exhausted before the match and almost unable to move. During the game, the leader saw that when Kenji got into foul trouble, the coach was trying to find a way to hear out his concerns. Naomi, while watching the game, sensed that Kenji was listening in on his motivation more than usual. In the end, Kenji's team united to win the match and confirmed the importance of looking away from distractions after the game. When Hiroshi suggested, "Let's look through and go celebrate together," the team responded with smiles. Martin began to fall behind the other runners during the race. Since it was raining, the hikers found it difficult to press on, but they pushed through. Terry realized he had passed the gallery entrance and doubled back. The tourists walked around the palace gardens. When the nurse gave Tanya an injection, she turned away. As the train went through the mountains, Ted took a photo. The security guard told us to stop taking photos and move along. There was a loud knock on the door. Hassan stood up and responded. When I heard someone calling my name, I turned around. Clive lifted up his daughter so she could see the deer. The explorers walked into the cave. The group of tourists walked over the old bridge slowly. The saleswoman came up to Fabio and asked if he needed any help. The monkey climbed up the tree with Kazuo's camera. As we came down from the summit, the weather worsened considerably. Kazuo got the monkey to climb down by offering a banana. Doug dropped back to help the injured hiker. Helen told her son to get down from the garden wall. While we were talking, Monty walked off without saying where he was going. Janine grabbed her coat and walked out of the room. Kenji had to brush up on his Japanese because he was moving to Tokyo for a year. The library was full of students swatting up on English grammar. Fiona was working hard to work through a coding problem. Nadia stayed up all night to work out the answer to an equation. I decided to start over because I made mistakes multiple times while trying to answer the questions. Sam dived into his new project and spent the entire weekend working on it. She was looking into how astronauts might travel to Mars one day. Hi, Arjun. Do you know what burdensome means? I don't know, you'll have to look it up in the dictionary. Both practical and written exams count toward the final grade. Emma spent most of the spring sick and fell behind compared to other students. Bill was trying to cram in as much studying as possible before the exam. Although Leo is the youngest in the class, he is able to keep up with the other kids. At the start of the presentation, you should lay out the main points for discussion. Then, move on to each discussion point. Be careful when writing your presentation. Spelling mistakes will mark you down. At the end of the presentation, you should sum up each conclusion. Kobayashi dropped out of high school, but went on to become a successful businessman. One day, he handed in important documents and quickly made copies before wiping off the notes for the meeting. He handed out materials to the team members and made sure everything was prepared before the school broke up. His friend Jesse was goofing off too much this semester, and his children had been playing up all morning. Kobayashi, ignoring warnings, shouted at the misbehaving children to carry on. He said, "I can't stand for laziness," and urged them to do better. The naughtiest kid in class, Satoshi, was always fooling around. When the teacher instructed the students to stop messing around and focus on their work, Satoshi decided to work on a new art project. After class, Satoshi packed up his things and got ready to leave. His friends Takashi and Yuki were very naughty, but Marina decided to let them get away with it. Rosie was extremely rude to the teacher and was always answering back. When the teacher said to take out the textbook, Satoshi turned to page 25 and completed the assignment. Marco was furious about the broken window, but decided to let Joe and Carmen off. Zozia, seeing the terrible mess the children had made, decided to tell them off. Kenji arrives at work every morning at 9 a.m. and clocks in. However, despite the storm, the engineers continued to soldier on and install new telephone lines. Kenji was feeling unwell and called in sick to inform them that he would be absent today. He clocks off every day at 5 p.m., and his colleague Debbie took the afternoon off to go to the dentist. On Fridays, Steve finishes work early to get off work and pick up the kids from school. The meeting was called off due to the manager being busy. With a pile of applications for the new managerial position, Kenji needed to look through them. Fiona struggled to finalize the company's accounts, but kept plugging away at it. Jenny was slogging away to finish her presentation. Kamal's manager chased up the report that was a week late. Ted, who used to be very proactive, has recently started to slack off. Ola was carrying out a survey on employee satisfaction. They talked over the new design and decided on it. Gio was on a 2-week vacation and needed to catch up on work that had piled up. Kenji had a lot of work and had to knuckle down to finish it. Angela met up with her colleagues every week to discuss new ideas. Kenji might be busy tomorrow, but he penciled in a meeting for it. Although it has been very busy recently, he plans to have off work next week. Kenji had been running his own company for 35 years, but decided to stand down. His daughter Jessica is set to take over the family-run business. Meanwhile, Elliot walked into a job with a famous fashion designer thanks to his impressive portfolio. Marvin is branching out into coaching as a successful tennis player. Katie can draw on her 20 years of experience as a therapist. Olivia wants to get into journalism and recently started an internship at a radio station. However, Ken fears that working 16 hours a day will burn himself out. Diana was chosen to head up the new sales department. Even if she loses her job at the bank, she can fall back on her cooking skills. Paul set out to become a millionaire by the age of 30 when he left school. On the other hand, he had been put off by the workload of becoming a lawyer. Femi has thrown himself into his new job at the hair salon. And Carolina joined a training course to get ahead in her career. When the children started school, she went back to her job as a mechanic. Nina plans to go into teaching after graduating from university. Tom doesn't like his job but is sticking with it until he gets a promotion. Joanna was winding down her business to take on a management position at a large hotel. And Brian recently decided to cash in on the recent bad weather by selling umbrellas in his store. Yamada and Sato were proud to enter into a new business partnership. Katie was offering free cake samples to drum up interest in the cafe. With all the banks in town closing down, everyone is using online banking. Tanaka's business expansion plan fell through because the bank didn't lend enough funds. However, Marco's garden center is doing well, turning over $250,000 a year. Allen's sportswear company has profited from this year's cold wave. Gemma bought out all the other partners and now owns the entire company. Rita's company sells furniture, but all manufacturing is farmed out to others. The board has finally come to a decision about the new company's logo. Chrissy started up her own hair salon, which just opened last week. As the business grows, we decided to take on more staff. Important decisions require the CEO's sign-off on. Mario's gas station finally went under after struggling for a long time. Ellie's company deals in antiques, selling items from around the world. A new bookstore is set to open up in the neighborhood. AL's store is selling off a lot of inventory with some great deals. Elsa, tired of running her business, decided to sell up. The bank agreed to write off the debt, saving Ethan's company from bankruptcy. The company is facing difficulties and might need to lay off some staff. Can you draw up a contract for the new clients? Katie recently had her bills stack up, leading to a significant amount of debt. During the summer, temperatures fluctuate slightly, but they eventually average out at around 25 degrees Celsius. The travel agency rounded down the price of the cruise from $1,207 to $1,200. The kids are counting down the days until they go camping. The company's stock price had been falling, but has finally started bottoming out. Last year, the number of people buying clothes online shot up dramatically. The project cost was estimated at £14,900, and it was rounded up to the nearest thousand for calculation. The coach divided the kids into 2 equal teams. If you want to set a budget, it's a good idea to start by adding up your monthly expenses. Adding 20 and 4 together gives you 24. The teacher asked, "What's left if you take 4 away from 20? Alfie counted out the money he owed me and placed it on the table. After a dramatic drop in May, the price of gold has evened out over the past 2 months. Over the last 6 months, it has started to level out. Renovating a house is very expensive, and costs quickly mount up." Shalia counted up the number of people wanting coffee and went to make it. While Georgia was paying the check, she added on a 20% tip. In the next problem, the class needed to multiply 20 by 4. Someone asked, "Does anyone know what you get if you divide 20 by 4? Kenji built on his experience working at hotels to set up his own guest house. Meanwhile, his friend Clive managed to muddle through the interview without any preparation. It was surprising when he got the job. Marcelo tried to fix the washing machine, but eventually gave up. When he couldn't get into college, he started his own business. Everything worked out. This result might be disappointing, but if you keep trying, you will eventually win out. Simon's campaign ran into difficulties when he was accused of lying. The small store has lost out since the supermarket opened in town. The decorator screwed up the job. I will never use them again. Anita's efforts paid off. The dress turned out beautifully. I didn't expect James to be so good at playing Hamlet, but he really carried it off. The future success of the company rides on winning this contract. When receiving the award, Carla put the success down to hard work. The Scottish team pulled off an astonishing victory by scoring 2 goals in the final 4 minutes. Marco didn't study at all for the English exam, but somehow scraped by. Maria's dream came off when her song became a big hit. Quasi sailed through the driving test easily. Supportive parents greatly contributed to success. Teachers said I would never amount to anything, but now I'm a lawyer. Earl saw people making money selling things online and decided to get in on it. Kenji never forgot to lock away his work tools. One day, while Alex was resting at the workplace, the janitor accidentally locked him in. When Ben got home, he realized he had forgotten the key and was locked out. Peter's new neighbor moved in over the weekend. His parents decided to move away to the countryside. They finally sold the house and moved out today. Jules settled into the new apartment very quickly. Did you check if you left the light on when you left the house? Since it was a hot day, I decided to put on the fan. If you're bored, why not turn on the TV? There's a good movie on tonight. Since the house light went out, Clara lit a candle. Andy blew out the candle before going to bed. Don't forget to turn off the TV before going to sleep. Elsa turned up the volume and started dancing when she heard her favorite song on the radio. Paula's neighbor asked her to turn down the volume on the stereo because it was too loud. The street lights come on at sunset. Kathy thought her computer was broken, but it turned out she hadn't plugged it in. The street lights go off at dawn. Kenji and his friends were ready to start their new life. Taro and Hanako decided to do a big cleaning over the weekend. First, they needed to tidy up the room before the guests arrived. Elliot's dad told him to clear away his toys. There was a lot of junk in the garage, so they cleared it out. The tree in the garden had died, so they needed to chop it down. Jason told Taro to mop up the water that had spilled on the floor. Since the room was messy, Hanako needed to pick up the clothes. Every night after dinner, Taro wipes down the table. Doug's hedge had grown too large, so it needed to be cut back. If the chicken smells bad, it should be thrown away. When Ella cooks dinner, her boyfriend washes up the dishes. On Tuesday morning, Taro takes out the trash. To move the lavender bush, they dug it up. After painting the living room, Paul and Sally put all the furniture back. It was a sunny morning, so Ian hung out the laundry. Nissa's room looked much nicer after she put up some pictures. Paul spent the whole day pulling up weeds. After the party, a lot of cleaning was needed, so everyone cleaned up. To finish the work faster, everyone decided to pitch in. Carl swept up the party trash and put it in bags. After finishing gardening, Scott put away the tools. Kenji loves to cook on his days off. First, he breaks up the chocolate and adds it to the cake batter. Next, he decides to place Nadia's cherry pie on the windowsill to cool down. Before trying a new recipe, he always measures out all the ingredients. Then, he mixes in the eggs and milk with the other ingredients. His sister can whip up a delicious meal with just a few ingredients. Before serving the curry, Kenji makes sure to fish out the bones. He starts by chopping up the onions, carrots, and potatoes. After that, he sets aside the chopped vegetables for later use. When the sauce boils over, it leaves a mess on the stove. Deb takes the leftovers out of the fridge and heats them up in the microwave. Kenji and Nadia were able to fill up 3 jars with the baked cookies. Kenji always cuts off the fat before cooking meat. To finish off the stew, he adds chopped parsley. Once the meat is cooked, he pours in the stock. To make a vegetarian version, he leaves out the meat and uses mushrooms instead. Mr. Sato decided to serve up seafood dishes for the special day. The children knew that they could get dessert if they ate up all their vegetables. However, when he started cooking, he realized that they had run out of pasta. So, he suggested dining out and decided to eat out. Meanwhile, the Tanaka couple preferred eating at home and decided to eat in. However, they noticed that the milk in the fridge had gone off, and they were surprised by the smell. The fish didn't agree with Mr. Tanaka's stomach, causing him severe stomach pains. For dessert, they enjoyed apple pie and ice cream, which go together perfectly. Mr. Sato broke off some bread and dipped it in olive oil. Greg was so hungry that he polished off the cake. Lisa shared out the chocolates among the children, giving each one 2 pieces. After a long day at the seaside, the children wolfed down their dinner. Meanwhile, the restaurant is able to cater for about 100 guests. Paul and Sarah ordered hamburgers and sodas to take away. The cake was delicious, but it would have been better to do without the cream on top. After the wedding, everyone drank to the newlyweds. As the cafe was closing soon, they quickly drank up and prepared to leave. After washing down their pizza with cold drinks, Peter's mug was almost empty, so they decided to top up. Anastasia loves skiing and lives for it. She always goes whenever she has the chance. Recently, I've gotten back into cycling. I hadn't done it since high school, but I've started it up again. Equestrianism takes time to get into, but if you become passionate about it, it's difficult at first, but you will like it if you keep at it. Addie's drawing skills are steadily coming along, and he might become an artist someday. Kim took up yoga after retirement. She does it for 30 minutes every morning. Learning the piano isn't easy, but if you stick at it, you might become a great pianist. While working in Seoul, I tried to pick up a bit of Korean by talking to locals. I attempted to pick up some Korean. If you want to become a great tennis player, it's best to start out young. Starting it from a young age helps. Ken is currently working toward a black belt in judo. He is working toward achieving it. Fabio might have become a great guitarist, but he threw away everything because he didn't practice. He threw it all away. Running was very difficult when I started, but now I get a lot of satisfaction from it. I get a lot of satisfaction from it now. Nathan told his daughters to stop lazing about and help with the house cleaning. He stopped them from lazing about. After the exams, the students went to a local park to wind down. They went to the park to wind down. Louisa spent the evening curled up on the sofa reading a book. She curled up on the sofa. Aiden needs to loosen up more. Tell him to come and dance with us. Tell him to loosen up. On days off from work, I like to sit around in the garden doing nothing. I sit around in the garden. Most Sundays, I lie around at home. I lie around at home. On stressful days, I take a bath to chill out. I take a bath to chill out. On Friday nights, Josh likes to kick back and watch TV. He likes to kick back and watch TV. One spring day, Mr. Yamada's hay fever flared up, and he was less energetic than usual. His wife, Ms. Sato, also came down with a cold, suffering from a headache and a runny nose. Mr. Yamada didn't have the energy to go to work, and Ms. Sato didn't feel up to working either. That afternoon, Ms. Sato felt worse and ended up throwing up multiple times. Mr. Yamada was worried that she might be suffering from food poisoning. At the hospital, Ms. Sato regained consciousness, and when she opened her eyes, her husband was by her side. After she came around, Mr. Yamada was relieved. Meanwhile, Mr. Yamada's son contracted the flu that was going around at school and passed it on to his sister. His sister developed a fever, and her symptoms worsened rapidly, but fortunately, she got over it quickly due to the doctor's treatment. Mr. Yamada's neighbor, Mr. Nakamura, pulled through a dangerous surgery and survived. One of his friends passed out during a performance, but soon regained consciousness. Ms. Sato's rash cleared up with the cream she started using, and her symptoms gradually improved. However, Mr. Yamada's hay fever didn't improve easily, but after a prolonged period, he finally managed to shake it off. Through this series of events, the family supported each other and bounced back from the difficulties. They learned a lot from this experience and grew even closer. Their story teaches the importance of overcoming challenges. High school student Tanaka and his friend Sato decided to sign up for his school team. One day, Tanaka was sent off after pushing over another player during a match, but the spectators continued to cheer him on. Meanwhile, Sato knocked out his opponent in the first round of a boxing match and got through to the final. The day before the match, Tanaka spent time sizing up his opponent and evaluating their weaknesses. Although Sato's team seemed to be losing, he turned it around at the last minute. On the other hand, Tanaka picked up my bow and aimed another arrow while honing his new archery skills. He was kept from completing the marathon due to a knee injury, but was invited to join in a game of cricket. Sato, who struggled to keep up with my brother during fitness training, goes for a brisk walk to burn off extra calories after meals and was worn out after playing tennis. However, he found relaxation by stretching out his arms during yoga. After cycling up a mountain, Jamal was wiped out. Meanwhile, Tanaka played squash to work off all my stress after a long day at the office and warmed up by jogging before a soccer game, then warmed down by stretching after the race. Leo, who works out at his local gym every morning, recognized Tanaka and Sato's efforts and growth and encouraged them to keep up their hard work. Mr. Watanabe is working on a new project and has mocked up a model of a new art museum. After that, on the way back from visiting the museum with the children, he colored in a dinosaur picture. His project was aimed at people who like jazz. The new music channel feeds on people's curiosity about aliens. Every Sunday morning, Mr. Watanabe enjoyed relaxing time by tuning into his favorite radio program. At the beginning of a horror movie, frightening music faded in, creating tension for the audience. As the music died away, the presenter came on stage. As the noise from the parade faded away, it moved further from us. Mr. Watanabe used his new headphones to filter out the surrounding noise, enhancing his concentration. Harumi and Aoi were traveling around Europe for their honeymoon. Their first destination was London, and on the way, they passed by the beautiful university town of Cambridge. After arriving in London, they checked in at the hotel reception and decided to rent a bike to get around the city efficiently. A few days later, they headed from London to Paris, where they checked out of their new hotel and went to the airport. During their stay in Paris, they went back to a special place as an anniversary visit, which was their first visit since the wedding. The hotel had a fantastic location overlooking the sea, and every morning, they soaked up the atmosphere while drinking coffee. Their next destination was Athens, so they prepared to head for Athens from Cyprus. During their trip, they packed in a lot of sightseeing, and that day they visited ruins and vineyards. On their way home, they brought back some delicious local olives. When they got back from cycling, it was already starting to get dark. The next day, when they set out for a hike, they made sure to bring waterproof clothing, a compass, and a map. On their trip to Chicago, they decided to set off at dawn when the roads were clear. Marimaru and Harumi recently went off to Miami for a short vacation. Getting away for a few days was truly wonderful. On their way to Barcelona, they stopped over for a night at a lovely hotel. Despite the heavy rain, they succeeded in putting up their tent. At the university's welcome party, Rio struck up a conversation to make his first friends. However, his roommate Takumi cut in, saying, "That's wrong." Rio decided to tone down his opinion, but Takumi, who often drowned out other people's conversations with his own views, stuck to his own thoughts. When Rio came out with an idea for a new app, Haruka talked it through enthusiastically and convinced the entire project team to work on it. However, the project leader Makoto talked him out of it, and the team ended up focusing on other plans. By the end of the semester, Rio realized that he still hadn't built any real friendships. People around him felt that he rambled on in conversations, and his presentations seemed to drone on to the audience. Later, seeing Rio lose confidence, Takumi stopped talking down to him and began to show him more respect. Rio blurted out his feelings, and his relationship with Takumi improved. Yuta spent the day at the library. He was preparing for an exam on ancient Greece and wanted to be well prepared before the test. As he read books, he noted down important points and read through the information thoroughly. After returning home, he typed up his notes and needed to cut down some sections to perfect his essay. Meanwhile, his friend Mai was flicking through magazines. While getting her hair cut at the salon, she checked out the latest fashion trends. Mai also dipped into a new novel and was impressed by its brilliance. On the other hand, Ken, a classmate, was talking to a journalist about a new movie role and had them jot down the details. Ken wrote in his age on the form and filled in other information. In the evening, Yuta and Mai reunited at the library and talked about their day. Mai explained how the books she read made for such an engaging experience, and Yuta shared how much he had read up on his topic. They were working hard toward their respective dreams, facing various challenges along the way. Still, they remained fascinated by the unknown, just as the term UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. At the end of the story, Yuta decided to write up his essay and cut out any unnecessary parts. He also wrote down his reflections and prepared to read them out in class. On exam day, he read out his answers with confidence and achieved an excellent grade. Haruto tried to get in touch with his friend Ayaka and called her multiple times, but it took him 6 calls before she finally picked up. Haruto was cooking and told Laura, "I'll call back in 10 minutes." Dave passed on a message from Rob. Anna works from home on Tuesdays and was supposed to dial into the meeting. After talking for over an hour, Simon and he said goodbye and hung up. Rob mentioned he wanted to follow up on the conversation about the new logo. "Please get back to me as soon as possible," he asked. Since the sound was hard to hear, he asked, "Could you please speak up a bit? I called Ollie several times tonight but couldn't get through." Unfortunately, his voice was breaking up. "I phoned around to ask my friends whether they wanted to go to the beach. When I asked, 'May I speak to Mr. Yamamoto?' I was told, 'Certainly. I'll put you through now, madam.' I love receiving letters from my father and always write back right away. I sent a text to Paul asking where he was, and he texted back that he was on the train. Our company is trying to reach out to new clients and offer discounts. Claudia sent out wedding invitations to all her friends and family. Chris emailed me a week ago, but I just emailed back recently. Murat filled out all the forms and sent them off to the passport office. Yumi was bouncing ideas off her friends to come up with a new business idea. Her creativity came across in the painting, and due to its unique style, the piece was attributed to Joan Moreau. Suddenly, it dawned on her that her business partner Takumi was actually the cause of the problem. This had never occurred to Takumi. He had touched on economics, health insurance, and education during meetings. Yumi wrote a proposal on environmentally friendly policies and put it to the board of directors. When her husband suggested buying a new kitchen, she decided to run with the idea. When she told her friends she was starting her own business, they all got behind the idea. While writing her autobiography, Yumi reflected on her childhood. Before deciding to move to Canada, they needed to think it through carefully. The creative manager asked the team to throw out as many ideas as possible. She had to choose between Danny and Carmen and ruled out the 3 other candidates. Selma was very creative and could think up a lot of great dishes. When buying a house, there are many factors to consider, but it often boils down to a money issue. Ted came up with several good ideas for the new logo and put forward the star-rated version. He asked Zoya if she would work for us, and she said she would think it over and let us know tomorrow. The teacher asked us all to think of a famous historical figure and write a story about that person. Takashi needed to expand on his experience working with animals, as his interviewer wanted to hear more about it. He had previously acquired many skills and handled various situations during his internship at a wildlife sanctuary. In the meeting, he successfully put across his ideas and gained even more respect from his colleagues. Later, His friend Yuri filled him in on a new project, and Takashi learned about the latest developments that had occurred in the office. However, Takashi had a question about one point and pointed out the parts where Yuri was mistaken. One day, Takashi couldn't remember a French word and made his colleagues laugh by acting it out. He also knew nothing about the new computer system, so he had the salesperson dumb it down for him. During the meeting to finalize the project details, he frequently came back to previous strategies and went back over some important points. At the end of the meeting, he alluded to the new policy, providing his team members with something to think about. Murakami didn't realize that the company was in deep debt. When the truth came out, he was shocked. He was unable to catch on to the company's situation and was surprised when the bankruptcy came out. The new neighbors had moved in, but it was difficult to suss out about them. Since they hardly talked about themselves, Murakami was able to see through their facade. His daughter Kane eventually owned up to breaking the window. She had denied it at first. When he had to level with the truth, his father said that although the cake looked good, it tasted terrible. His son Daisuke tried to find out who was dating whom from his friends, but she only let on that she knew something. The Murakami family fell for the salesman's pitch and bought a car, but it broke down a few days later. Daisuke's friend Tyler had been promising a refund for months, but was just stringing him along. After eating all the cakes, John tried to cover up by claiming that the dog ate them. Pio always made up excuses for submitting his homework late. Today, he claimed that his school bag was stolen. Alice was accused of messing around because she had canceled their dates 3 times. Larry's alibi didn't add up. Amrit promised to study at home, but was caught out by his mother for coming home late. Georgie tried to explain away the damage to my car, saying it was just a minor scratch. The CEO played down the company's financial issues. Mario glossed over the poor results and claimed the team would quickly get back on track. Christy made out that everything was fine, but it was clear she was stressed about the interview. Aaron looked like he was injured, but I knew he was putting it on. Taro faced opposition from those around him when presenting his new business plan, but he succeeded in bringing around many people to his point of view. Additionally, his friend Haruka, seeing Taro feeling down, offered encouraging words to buck him up. During the presentation, his team rooted for him, helping Taro to relieve his nervousness. Meanwhile, the president of his competitor's company did not take Taro's ideas seriously, and the sales representative tried to reason with him. Ultimately, Taro managed to win him over, and the company agreed to participate in his project. His sister, Yuki, heard about a new beauty salon opening nearby and immediately went to check it out. She liked the salon so much that she put Taro onto it, taking him to the place. When one of their friends tried to take on a dangerous sport, Taro and the other friends egged him on, and the crowd urged him on. However, another friend of Taro, Kenji, was initially not keen on the idea, but someone put him up to trying it. Taro was spurred on by the fact that his ideas eventually gained widespread support, and his project succeeded, showing that his efforts had paid off. The night before the game, the team discussed new tactics. The leader, Ichiro, hoped that everyone on the team would go along with the tactics. However, Kenta came out against the plan, and tension within the team increased. Meanwhile, Mika was known for always siding with Ichiro's suggestions. As the game began, Kenta hit out at the opponent's provocations. However, he controlled his emotions and showed the courage to stand up to the challenges. The team pushed back on the unfair treatment by the management, demonstrating their unity. During the game, when Ichiro's suggestion was shot down, instead of getting discouraged, he fought back and strongly asserted his opinions. He laughed off the opponent's provocations with a smile and ignored their attempts. After the game, Ichiro gave Mika chocolate to make up for the previous misunderstanding. Kenta shrugged off his mistakes and continued to work hard to iron out the final details. Mika rose above the criticism of her talents and achieved success in the game. Mr. Matsumoto felt that his opinion was not being understood and was asked by his boss, "What are you getting at?" On the other hand, Ayumi frequently speaks out about environmental issues. The university professor weighed in on the debate about the new power plant. After the match, the coach laid into the players, and Andy lashed out at the person who threw trash on the street. Farah based all her arguments on the facts, and Ben and Gus finally made up. They had fallen out when they applied for the same job. Sam tried to make the waiter dress up as a hot dog, but backed down when the waiter threatened to quit. When Pete showed Martin the facts, Martin climbed down and admitted his mistake. When my boss criticized my work, only one of my colleagues stuck up for me. Moira tried to drag Phil into her argument with the chef. When my father accused me of lying, Joe backed me up. Phil chose to stay out of it. Kirsten had been threatening to fire Imran, but when he promised to work harder, she backed off. Katie, I'm sorry for saying I didn't like your dress. I take that back. Craig's parents finally caved in and bought him a game console. After Arun and Les patched things up, they bought Anna flowers to smooth things over. Ed didn't like Carla's new book, but he watered down his opinion when writing the review. One morning, the elementary school play began. The children suddenly burst out laughing when the clown pretended to fall on purpose. After the play, Craig had been having a bad day at work, but watching a comedy film helped him cheer up a bit. It was Sophie's birthday, and although it was suggested she should lighten up a little, she was still studying. Patrick's love for music shines through when he starts playing the guitar. Yana was sad, but when she was given concert tickets, she brightened up a little. Anna had been feeling unwell lately, but after having tea and cookies, she perked up. Hero's jokes are always very funny, and he really cracks people up. Donnie's face lit up when he saw the presents on the table. When Linda feels stressed, she calms down by listening to music. Since Andre lost his job, I've been checking up on him every day, but he has been very down. Kathy and Jamal broke up last month, but Kathy felt it was hard to get over it. However, she eventually decided to move on. Since Kim's cat went missing, she has been very sad, and I really feel for her. Corey's daughter starts to settle down when he sings a calm song. Petra had been sulking for days, but I hoped she would snap out of it. Jack is a very introverted person, but he finally opened up and talked about his feelings. Ed toughened up considerably during his 3 years in the military. I see a therapist to help work through my problems. Whenever I feel sad, I can always turn to my sister. My therapist has helped me cope with many issues. One night, Chris was hanging out with friends at a cafe. He had been bottling up his emotions for a long time, but he finally broke down and confessed that he was feeling really down. Sadie had also had her anger towards her boss's rude behavior build up, but it eventually spilled over, and she told her boss how she felt. Andy, who was there, fell apart when he heard that Chris was moving to another country. The song they were listening to was so moving that it always set him off. Meanwhile, Simone's eyes misted over as she remembered her childhood in the countryside. Claire flew into a rage when her computer crashed, and she lost all her work. Seeing people throw trash on the subway always got to her. At the end of the movie, when the hero died, Tamal and Sam choked up with emotion. Her husband would tense up every time they tried to talk about money, and Troy freaked out when he found a huge spider climbing the wall. He was fed up with the neighbors' fights, which had been getting him down for months. When Pete proposed, Bella's eyes welled up with tears. Her grandchildren always enjoyed winding her up. The pressure at work weighed on him. She exploded with her feelings and took it out on him. Lisa, standing on stage, froze up with nervousness and couldn't say anything. Although the manager is usually very understanding, he blew up when he heard she had left her work laptop on the train. After graduating from university, Kasuga was unsure which company to decide on, but ultimately chose to go for a major corporation. He had been torn between becoming an engineer or a designer for a long time, but eventually decided to go for a designer role. When answering questions during the interview, he was asked how he settled on selecting the best candidates and replied that he had carefully reviewed each applicant's work before making a decision. Kasuga's future plans hinged on whether he could save enough money. He decided to buy a car, and among several options, he leaned toward a red sports car. However, he could not secure the 5% raise he wanted and had to settle for a 3% increase. His friend Yasmin was toying with the idea of cutting her hair short, but ultimately did not follow through. Marie was unsure which new job to accept and decided to sleep on it. Shona regretted quitting her job but had to live with the decision. Paula weighed up her options before deciding which camera to buy. Somita was mulling over which candidate to hire. She liked the plans for the new apartment block, but the final decision came down to funding. After many failures, Stephen banked on this new recipe to impress his guests. Ahmed bet on a hot summer this year and bought an ice cream van. They narrowed down their list of potential homes to 2 properties. The cafe was expected to succeed, but they forgot to factor in the local competition. Sonia opted out of the boat trip because she always gets seasick. Archie picked out the toy he wanted for his birthday. Haru was planning a picnic with his friends, but Yuki accidentally mixed up his bag with his own and forgot to bring the drinks. When Yuki realized this mistake, he felt very embarrassed and thought he would never be able to live down this incident. However, his friends, joking around, rubbed it in by persistently mentioning it. Minako was in charge of preparing the meal, but made a big slip-up by forgetting to buy some necessary ingredients. Since Haru had relied heavily on Minako, he was surprised when she let him down. Later, when Tomoya missed a penalty kick in a soccer match, his teammates did not encourage him. Instead, they landed him in trouble by making his failure a bigger issue. However, Tomoya resolved to overcome his mistake and bounce back as a leader. Minako crossed out the wrong words from her notes and rewrote them correctly. Seeing this, Haru was impressed by Minako's attitude of learning from mistakes and moving forward. Ultimately, this series of events gave Haru an opportunity to reassess his relationships with his friends. He learned something from each mistake and prepared himself to move toward a better future by making failures stand out. Everyone promised to go back and enjoy their next gathering together. Murakami decided to buy an old manor house, but the place looked like it might fall apart. As he walked through the house, he felt that the ceiling could potentially fall in. While he was looking at the living room, suddenly a picture fell off the wall. Shocked, he almost fell down on the spot but managed to recover. Later, while taking a walk in the garden, he accidentally knocked over a potted plant, and the sudden noise startled a dog, which rushed over to him. When the dog jumped on him, he fell over again, and during that, his wallet fell out of his pocket. Murakami understood that he needed to do a lot of work to improve the condition of the house. He attempted to take apart an old clock to repair it, and also decided to unblock the drain, which was clogged up. During the process, he accidentally drove into a tree and smashed up his van. After this series of events, Murakami decided to reassess his plans for his new home. He worked so hard that his clothes wore out, trying to rebuild the house, but his friends thought his project was disastrous and eventually split up with him. He learned a lot from this experience, but his adventure was far from over. Endo was advancing his research at university when a problem suddenly came up. He had to break down his thesis into smaller sections and sort out the issues with his experiments with his colleague Sasaki. They stayed up late into the night, thrashing out the problem, and eventually found a solution. The proposal for a new highway came up against local opposition, which also affected Endo's project. He and his friend Mariko found it difficult to relax as the final exams approached. The exams were hanging over them. Additionally, while hiking, they had to contend with strong winds and heavy rain. However, despite expecting the event to end in disaster, everything surprisingly turned out well. Endo was skilled in customer service. He dealt with their complaints fairly and never got angry. One time, he and his friend Ben resolved their disagreement when they realized it was a misunderstanding. Sawada's computer crashed, but she worked around it using pen and paper. Anton ran out of green paint but managed to get around it somehow. Kibita didn't know why her equation was wrong, but she thought it through carefully. Endo spent the whole night figuring out how to use his new TV. Femi was considering moving to a new part of town, so she went to check it out. When a pipe was leaking, he called in a plumber to fix it. The new printer had some issues cropping up, so he needed to call someone to repair it. Bitna told Danny she was nervous about her presentation, but he brushed it aside easily. Whenever a problem arose, Gitanjali would turn to her grandmother for advice. Endo was advancing his research at university when a problem suddenly came up. He had to break down his thesis into smaller sections and sort out the issues with his experiments with his colleague Sasaki. They stayed up late into the night, thrashing out the problem, and eventually found a solution. The proposal for a new highway came up against local opposition, which also affected Endo's project. He and his friend Mariko found it difficult to relax as the final exams approached. The exams were hanging over them. Additionally, while hiking, they had to contend with strong winds and heavy rain. However, despite expecting the event to end in disaster, everything surprisingly turned out well. Endo was skilled in customer service. He dealt with their complaints fairly and never got angry. One time, he and his friend Ben resolved their disagreement when they realized it was a misunderstanding. Sawada's computer crashed, but she worked around it using pen and paper. Anton ran out of green paint but managed to get around it somehow. Kibita didn't know why her equation was wrong, but she thought it through carefully. Endo spent the whole night figuring out how to use his new TV. Femi was considering moving to a new part of town, so she went to check it out. When a pipe was leaking, he called in a plumber to fix it. The new printer had some issues cropping up, so he needed to call someone to repair it. Bitna told Danny she was nervous about her presentation, but he brushed it aside easily. Whenever a problem arose, Gitanjali would turn to her grandmother for advice. On a sunny day, Kamachi remembered the day when her music career unexpectedly came about. A producer had seen her performing and recognized her talent. When she tried to log into her account, a sudden message came up, informing her that her account was blocked. Her circus team was made up of very talented individuals. Since the internet became widespread, staying in touch with friends had come along significantly. Kamachi and her friend Yu had come out of the toy store with presents. When trying to understand what the train conductor was saying, Luann struggled to make out the words. While having dinner, the dog suddenly made off with a leg of lamb. Anticipating the summer weather, thousands of tourists made for the coast. When Kim was asked what she thought of Toshi's new novel, she said she liked it very much. When the 10 o'clock news came on, Derek sat down in front of the TV. Kamachi's daughter is still waiting for the results to come through and is very nervous. Emily is currently doing up her home, and it will be wonderful once completed. Since many people use bank cards, cash might be done away with in the future. No matter how much cleaning is done, the graffiti won't come off the wall. The city council needs to decide how to do about the city's waste problem. Ria was very disappointed with her wedding cake and insisted on having it done over. One day, Haruki went to a ski resort with his friends. As soon as they got to the resort, they went straight to the slopes. Although Haruki was excited by the different atmosphere, he decided to get down to skiing as usual. However, the weather was bad that day, which significantly set back their plans. While skiing, his friend Nagisa accidentally set off the smoke detector. Seeing her panic, Haruki thought of a way to calm her down. Meanwhile, another friend, Ryosuke, felt the fear set in. To boost everyone's spirits, Haruki suggested that they all get together to regroup and make a new plan. He also decided to get back at Nagisa for her previous rude behavior towards him by excluding her from the next activity. Later, they decided to use their individual talents and set up a business selling surfboards, with Ryosuke taking the lead. They set out the details of this new venture and discussed how to proceed. At the end of the story, Haruki promised his friends that they would continue to support each other and get over any obstacles while wishing for the success of their new business. They were touched by Haruki's suggestion and vowed to unite and move forward together. Ichiro went about starting an important project by heading to his usual coffee shop. After he went after a bag that his friend Hana had forgotten, he met her. Inside the shop, there were many sweet cakes that he could go around and take freely. Hana was trying to go through the sadness after losing her beloved dog recently. After leaving the shop, Ichiro went over the company's accounts by heading to the office. His daughter left the house to go to her ballet class every Saturday. It seemed like an event was going on in the neighborhood, as loud music could be heard. When a new baby is at home, parents often have to go without sleep. It took a few hours for the pain to go away after he returned from the dentist. He and Michiko go back a long way from kindergarten, and since she couldn't find the recipe, she went along by making the dish as she went. The gym trainer, Zach, is usually referred to as Zach. He was against buying water in plastic bottles. The children watched as the hot air balloon slowly went up into the sky. Kelly decided to go for the high-paying job at the software company. All the money earned today will go toward funding the new school library. The team of firefighters went into the burning building. As soon as the teacher went out of the classroom, the children began to act up. Rob and Ichiro sat on the beach watching the sunset go down. It was a cloudy day, but Ramon went ahead with the picnic. Haruka has always loved painting, and people who see her work are always moved. One day, her friend Yoshi decided to open a cafe and asked Haruka to put up a mural. However, this project turned out to be more difficult than she had imagined, and Haruka nearly gave up along the way. She spent a lot of time putting together various designs and successfully put them down on the wall. Yoshi was very pleased with Haruka's completed mural and unveiled her work on the opening day of the new cafe. At the opening event, many people wanted to take away pieces of Haruka's work. It was a great opportunity to take in how much talent she had. Meanwhile, another friend of Haruka, Makoto, had begun to take to golf. Through this new hobby, Makoto was able to put behind his stress. He started going to the course every weekend and frequently took along friends. Makoto also decided to undergo rigorous training with a professional instructor to put through his golf skills. The training was very tough, but he took up the challenge and learned a lot in the process. His enthusiasm and effort gave out inspiration to many other golfers. Through this experience, Haruka and Makoto learned that sometimes it's important to give in to overcome many of life's difficulties. They also recognized the value of sharing their belongings and memories with others, and by giving away their things, they were able to bring joy to other people's lives. Finally, they learned that to overcome any difficulty, sometimes you have to put up with it, such as enduring the long train ride home after a long day at the cafe. This story teaches us that we can overcome any challenge.